everybody! It is day 2 of Audubon Sun Camp. Yes! I hope you had so much fun during our first time together. We are going to have even more fun today. Remember, my name is Miss Erin. Can I get a hi, Miss Erin? As loud as you can. Yes! Excellent! Alright, so yesterday, or whenever you watched the first video of camp, we met some really interesting, cool birds, what I thought were the most interesting birds in the world, and we challenged ourselves to some bird Olympics. But we are going to learn today how to be actual ornithologists, bird scientists, okay? And people can be ornithologists who are just like regular everyday people. Anybody can be an ornithologist. These are just people who really enjoy seeing different kinds of birds and trying to identify different kinds of birds, okay? Identifying the different kinds of birds can be really challenging, but it's kind of like a puzzle. It can be really fun. Now, there are about 10,000 different kinds of birds in the world, okay? So if you were trying to decide what kind of bird you saw, you'd be choosing from one of about 10,000 birds. But luckily, here in North America, there are only, let me check and make sure I'm right, there are only about 900 different kinds of birds, okay? Only about 900. And then in the state of Maryland, only 436 different kinds of birds, okay? So we are gonna practice learning what makes a bird and learning the different ways to identify different kinds of birds so that we can be real live ornithologists, all right? But before we get to all of that, being an ornithologist requires being a really good observer, okay? And that means being able to look or listen, somehow be able to take in your environment, okay? You may have observed that I have some friends with me today. You may have observed that, okay? And I'll just answer your questions that I'm sure you're having right now, which is, are they real? And the answer is yes. They are real, even this little one, but they're not alive, okay? I am gonna show you these a little bit later, but just so that you can see. So these are real birds, they have real feathers, and they did used to be alive, but now they're stuffed like a teddy bear, and the reason that they are stuffed is so that we can learn from them, look at them and learn from them, okay? So we're gonna get back to those folks a little bit later, but we need to practice being good observers. And to do that, I'm gonna need you, this is the exciting moment, to get out your camp kit that says number 2. Today is day 2. Don't get out everything from the kit. There's some really exciting things in there. I know you're gonna wanna pour it all out and take a look. I promise you we will get to use everything in here. Right now, I just need you to pull out this, okay? There is a booklet in your kit called the Bird Sleuth Explorer's Guidebook, okay? And that's just another way of saying that we are ornithologists. We're learning how to explore and observe birds, okay? This guidebook, you know, it's like 12 pages long, and we're not gonna do every single thing in the guidebook today in this video, but it's yours, and you can do all of the activities in it at some point whenever you want. For now, while we're together today, we are actually going to open up our Bird Sleuth Explorer's Guidebook to page number 3. The page numbers are at the bottom right here. We're going to open it up to page number 3, all right? So take out your guidebook, turn to page number 3. I'll give you a few seconds to get ready. Okay, so this page tells us to wake up our ears. Now I know, you may have seen already that in your book, or sorry, in your camp kit, there are binoculars. And we are definitely going to be observing by looking a lot, okay? But it's also important to be a good observer, to be able to listen, which also means being quiet. Yeah, quiet. Because if you're loud, you won't be able to hear anything outside in nature, and you might scare away all of the things that you're trying to observe, okay? So this first activity in our guidebook is to practice listening, all right? So the guidebook tells us to find a quiet spot. So I'm up here on top of Patterson Park Audubon Center. Patterson Park is in the back. It's a pretty quiet spot. So you'll need to find a quiet spot. And it says to sit and listen for 5 minutes. We're gonna do 3 minutes, okay? 3 minutes. And while you're sitting and listening, you shouldn't be making any sounds. Nobody near you will hopefully be making any sounds. You'll just be listening for the sounds that you hear. And when you hear some things, you are going to make a mark on the bottom of this page. It's called a sound map, okay? So you'll also need your pencil. That was in your day 1 bag, so hopefully you still have your pencil, okay? The symbols that you use to mark what things you hear can be anything you want. If you hear a car, maybe you write a letter C for car, maybe you draw a picture of a car, maybe you make a circle, that means car. That's totally up to you. If you hear birds, you choose a different symbol, okay? And then you try to listen for what direction you hear the sound coming from. Is it coming from in front of you or behind you or this way or that way? You're really gonna have to open up your ears, okay? And then you'll draw whatever it is that you hear, a symbol for it, on the side of the map, pretending that you are in the center, okay? So if I hear something to my left, your left, then I'm gonna draw it over here to the left of the X on the sound map. Make sense? Okay, I'm gonna set my timer for 3 minutes. We're not gonna do 5 minutes because we have a lot of really awesome things to get to today, and I'm so excited, I can't wait. So 3 minutes, silently listening, observing, drawing on your sound map, and go. About a minute left. 5 seconds. All right, go ahead and put your pencil down. So what kinds of things did you observe? It's a little breezy up here on top of the roof. What kinds of things did you hear? I have this big wing feather, and of course it's doing exactly what feathers want to do, which is fly. Brought my owl on it. Okay, so hopefully you were able to hear lots of things. It might depend whether you're inside or outside, what kinds of things that you would hear, right? So the first thing I noticed, and it's kind of amazing, after you start listening for a couple minutes, your ears start to hear lots of different things that you don't normally think about or hear. So the first thing I heard was an air conditioner. Everyone's air conditioners are on their roofs or in their windows, so I heard one over there, and then I heard my building's air conditioner turn on right there. I heard some birds flying over, so I made a symbol, like I heard 2 birds flying, and then later I heard 3 different directions, and then I heard 4 sounds go right over top of me. And then I heard there are people down here playing tennis on the tennis courts. I wasn't really thinking about it before, but once I started listening, I heard them. So I drew a tennis ball, and I made a letter S because I could hear their sneakers making noise on the ground, like squeak, squeak. And then some word bubbles, I heard them talking to each other. And then definitely down here on the road, I heard a bus. I heard 2 buses, 3 cars. I heard a honk honk. And then a big truck right at the end came by. I don't know what it had in this big dump truck, but it was loud. Okay, so hopefully you were able to observe some things. This is a really good exercise to do when you're practicing being an ornithologist or any kind of scientist, because in order to be a really good scientist, we have to be really good at making observations, okay? That just means being aware of our surroundings, whether it's noises or things we see or smell, using all of our senses, okay? So, that was a good exercise. Now, let's talk about how to know whether a bird is a bird, okay? That's kind of the first thing to know. We're going to use our Bird Sleuth Explorer's Guidebook again, so tuck that somewhere where you'll be able to reach it in a little while. All right, so if we're going to go looking for birds, we have to make sure that we know what a bird is, right? I'm sure we all probably know what a bird is, but really, what makes a bird and not some other kind of animal? This is the first thing we should know to be able to identify a bird. So what's something that all birds have? Can you think of something on a bird's body that all birds have, no matter what kind of bird it is? All 10,000 different kinds of birds in the world have a... Yes, they have a beak, and that is why I have my friends here, because they have some really awesome beaks. Where can I put this so it's not going to fly away? How about over here? Can you hear those birds flying by? They're chimney swifts. I could hear them the whole time we were doing our sound mapping. Okay, so a bird's beak is their what? Their mouth. Yes, a bird's beak is their mouth. And a bird's beak is perfectly shaped for whatever kind of food that bird eats. So think of a bird that you know that is a predator, a bird that eats other smaller animals. Can you think of a bird like that? What about an eagle or an owl? So this owl, since it eats other animals, it has to have a really sharp beak. So I want to get close and show you. So check out this owl's beak, okay? It's kind of rounded, but it's super pointed, okay? It's really pointy so that it can grab onto its prey. All right, so its beak is perfectly shaped. That's called, if you have had Audubon field trips, we've talked about what that means when an animal's body is like perfectly suited to its environment, to its habitat. There's a special science word. Do you remember what it is? It's called an adaptation. Yes, I knew you knew it. An adaptation. So a bird's beak, an owl's beak being perfectly shaped to catch its prey, that's an example of an adaptation. All right, now think of a bird that eats insects. Okay? Not an owl. An owl's beak would not be able to grab on. Remember yesterday, or on day one, when we were doing the challenge of picking up the beads with the clothespin, we were pretending that that was our beak, and those were little bugs, right? Imagine if the owl was trying to do that with its beak. It would not be very good at it. They would probably, the insects would probably be able to escape. But this bird, this tiny little bird is called a wood thrush. Okay? And look at its beak. Its beak is perfectly shaped to grab onto tiny little bugs. Its beak kind of looks like a tweezer's. Okay? So if you were a bird that eats insects, you would need a beak that is shaped like this so that you could be very precise and grab onto. I wish I had had this yesterday for our eating challenge. I'd be able to grab onto the insects so much more easily. Okay, so a very small, precise beak like a tweezer's lets birds like songbirds be able to catch insects. Now, think of a bird that eats fish. Would this bird's beak be able to catch a fish? Not really. It needs a beak that is kind of like a spear. So this bird is called a great blue heron, and it wades in the pond, in the water, on the edge of the land, and it moves super slowly, and then look at that beak. When it sees its fish prey, it uses that beak like a spear, okay? And it's able to spear and capture the fish. All right, so all birds have beaks. Sometimes they're called bills, beaks. All birds have them, but that can't be the only thing that we use to define a bird, because there actually is another animal that has something like a beak. Have you ever heard of this animal? The duck-billed platypus? I mean, look at this thing. It kind of looks like a beaver. It acts like a beaver. It swims in the water and it kind of has paddles. It's kind of like a seal, but it has this bill. Yeah, so there are other animals that have a thing kind of like a beak. So we need something else to help us. So what's something else that all birds have? Well, all three of these birds need to fly. And what body part do they use to fly? Their wings, yes. My wing that kept trying to fly away. So all birds have wings. This is the wing of a turkey, actually. And, oh my gosh, that feels so good when it's hot out. Yeah, its wing feathers help to power itself up into the air so that it can fly. The chimney swifts are flying all around. It's so cool. Okay, so most birds use their wings to fly, but not all birds fly. Remember our ostrich from yesterday? It has wings, but it doesn't fly. Remember, it runs. It runs really fast. Can you think of another bird that doesn't fly? It lives somewhere really cold. Yeah, penguins. So penguins have wings, but they don't use them to fly. What do they use their wings for instead? Yep, they use them to swim. So they swim through the water. So, okay, all birds have beaks. All birds have wings. Not all birds fly. There's still something else that we can use to help us define a bird. Something else that all birds have. And this thing is actually in your bag. So look in your bag and pull out a feather. There should be a feather in there. Okay. So all birds have feathers. And feathers are kind of like a bird's outfit, right? They cover their whole body except for maybe their feet or their legs, although this bird, the owl, does have feathers on its feet as well. So it's kind of like the bird's clothing, right? We wear clothing to help us stay dry and warm. Woo! My birds are flying away. And birds' feathers do the exact same thing. So birds have feathers called down. You might even have jackets with down feathers in them that helps birds stay really warm. And their feathers can be waterproof. It's like wearing a jacket. So if it rains or if they are swimming in a pond, the water kind of rolls off. Okay? So birds' feathers are really, really important to help them stay warm and dry. And birds' feathers might help them to hide, depending on their colors. They might be camouflaged. Or maybe their feathers are really brightly colored if they want to stand out to attract a mate. Ooh la la. Okay? So feathers are amazing, and I want to be able to take a look at a feather with you. So in order to be a good observer, a good scientist, we're going to look at our feather. Make sure you're holding on to it really tightly, especially if you are outside, because as you have seen, feathers are kind of made to float on the breeze, and if I let go of this feather, the wind is going to blow it away. If you're outside, make sure you hold on to it really tightly. You're going to pull out something else from your bag. There is a little tool called a hand lens, okay? It's like a little magnifying glass, right? Hand lenses are great because you can take it with you wherever you want. Yours even came with a little black strap that you can put through the hole in the bottom and take it with you. You could attach it to your backpack, or you could attach it to your wood cookie necklace if you have one. And so we're going to take a look at our feathers using our hand lens. I'm actually going to use my hand lens. I already have one. I'm going to put it around my neck so it doesn't get lost. So what do you notice first about your feather? Okay? Touch it. Is it soft or hard or stiff? Mine's really soft. Ooh, that feels nice too. Okay. Is it heavy or light? Yeah, really light. Most birds have to be able to fly, so their feathers and every other part of them has to be very light so that they can get off the ground. What about its colors? Is your feather kind of plain, or is it really colorful? My feather is really plain, but if I look at it at just the right angle, maybe your feather does this too. If you hold it up to the light and kind of move it back and forth, do you see those kind of shiny colors? Only some feathers do this. This is called iridescent. It means that when the light hits the feather in just the right way, you might see kind of bluish, greenish, purplish colors. So a lot of birds have iridescence, which just makes them really cool. Okay? So take out your hand lens. Let's take a closer look at our feathers. A hand lens is like a tiny magnifying glass, so if you hold it up to your feathers, you'll be able to see its structure. And your hand lens actually has two parts to it. This larger part you can use to make things look close up, but then this smaller circle right here, that actually is even more magnified. So if you look at that, if you look through that spot, it will look even closer. Whoa. That's cool. So the different parts of birds' feathers are held together. I don't know if you can see this with your hand lens. They're held together with kind of little tiny hooks. So each tiny strand of the feather, if you kind of like pull it apart, you can see them like attached to each other, and then eventually they can pull apart. It's kind of like a piece of Velcro. So I have a piece of Velcro here. The tiny strands of the feather are hooked together kind of like this, with teeny tiny microscopic hooks that maybe you can see with your hand lens, but if you pull them apart, they can come apart. But birds like for their feathers to stay really nice and smooth. They don't like for them to get all tussled and pulled apart, because when they're flying, they want to be able to be really smooth and aerodynamic, okay? So they want their feathers to stay together like this, okay? So one other cool thing about feathers, if their feathers do get tussled, that just kind of happens, you know, when they're living their daily lives, their feathers might get a little messed up, but then they'll actually lose those feathers and grow new feathers, and that's called molting. It's kind of the same as like our hairs kind of fall out and we grow new hair, okay? So they always have fresh feathers to make sure that they can be really smooth and aerodynamic while they're flying. All right, so pull out your journal at this point. You should have that still from yesterday, right? And pull out, you can either use your pencil or you can use your crayons that you should also still have from your day one kit. Open up your journal to the next blank page, and I'm gonna give you, let's say, 3 minutes to draw a picture of the bird that you think that feather came from, okay? Just kind of use your imagination. Draw a picture of whatever bird you think that feather that you have came from. I'm gonna do the same, but I'm gonna do it on my dry erase board. All right, 2 minutes to draw whatever kind of bird you think it came from, okay? You got your journal ready? Got your pencil, got your crayon ready? 2 minutes, here we go. What kind of bird, imagine what kind of bird you think that feather came from. I actually know what kind of bird it came from, so I'm trying to draw the real thing. But you can just kind of imagine what kind of bird it came from. We're going to practice identifying a bird using whatever bird you draw. We've got about a minute left. I kind of gave you a hint earlier when my wing was flying away. About 15 seconds. All right, so let's stop. What kind of bird do you think your feather came from? I'm going to show you. My drawing isn't perfect, but hopefully you can tell what kind of bird this is. Hint, it says gobble, 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 gobble. Yes, this bird is called a turkey. And that feather that you have actually came from a turkey. There's lots of different kinds of feathers on different parts of the turkey. My feather was maybe from the turkey's chest, where its feathers are really soft and warm, but different feathers from other parts of the turkey's body have different functions. So we saw the bird's wing, and these feathers have to be really stiff to be able to flap and push the air so that the turkey can fly. Yes, turkeys do fly. So this is what a turkey's wing feather looks like. Kind of looks like what they used to write in the olden times. Or a turkey's tail feather looks like this. So it's long and broad and it fans out so that the turkey can show off to all of his girlfriends. Hey ladies, like my feathers? Y'all are silly. Okay, so each of these feathers has different functions. They're shaped differently. They even have different colors. So I said that we were going to use your feather to practice identifying a bird. Okay, that's what we're going to get really good at today. We're going to try to see if we can identify some different kinds of birds. That is one of the fun parts. It's like a really challenging puzzle about being an ornithologist. A bird just flew over. It was a pigeon. Okay, so take a look at the bird that you drew. And we're actually going to get your Bird Sleuth Explorer's Guidebook back out, and we're going to turn to page 8. So I know we're skipping a bunch of pages. Like I said, you can go back and do other pages another time if you want to. We're going to kind of go out of order. So turn to page 8, okay? You should see some birds of different sizes and some colors. So the first thing that we're going to do to try to identify your bird that you drew is to figure out what size it is, okay? So here's kind of a scale of different size birds, all the way from a little bitty sparrow all the way up to a big goose, okay? Take your pencil and draw a star. The instructions say put a star on the line closest to the size of the bird that you think that you drew, okay? This is just for practice. So since I drew a turkey, I'm gonna put a star up here next to the goose because a turkey is really big. But if you thought that that feather came from a smaller bird, then put it somewhere down here. Was it closer to a sparrow size, or a robin is a little bigger, or a crow, or maybe that's a raven is even bigger, okay? So size is the first thing that's gonna help you narrow down what kind of bird you saw. All right, next thing you're gonna do is think about its colors, okay? So when you're trying to figure out what kind of bird you see, you'll wanna notice what colors it is, okay? That will help you to identify what kind of bird it is. So the bird that you drew, did it have any colors? Mine did. Maybe circle up to 3 of these colors. There are very few birds that have more than 3 different colors on their body. There are some, but let's see. So a turkey is brown, white, and black. Okay, what color was your bird? I circled brown, white, and black. Okay, so I'm starting to try to narrow down my options. All right, so we're gonna back up a little bit because we skipped some important steps. If we were exploring, let's say in Patterson Park or wherever you are, and we saw a real live bird, the first thing we would actually want to notice is where the bird is and what it's doing. And that can actually really help us narrow down what kind of bird it is, because there are some birds that only live in certain places and there are birds that never live in certain places, okay? And there are some birds that do certain activities and other birds that never do those activities. So a good example is if we walked up to the boat lake in Patterson Park and we saw a bird swimming in the water. Well, we can already rule out a Baltimore Oriole. We know that that bird swimming in the pond is not a Baltimore Oriole because Baltimore Orioles never swim, okay? But maybe a bird like a duck that's usually swimming would be a closer match, all right? So let's turn to page 6. So we're going back. So these are some different activities that birds might be doing that will help you to identify what kind of birds they are. So this part in particular right here, it says birds using habitat right here on page 6. I'll put the page number down here. Birds using their habitat. So if you saw a bird outside, you would want to check whether it is on a branch. Is it sitting in a tree on a branch? Is it sitting on a wire or on a building? Is it flying or soaring in the air? So I'm seeing all these birds flying past me. That's the one I would check. Is it on the ground? Is it swimming? Is it eating or drinking? So check one of those off. That's what you would do if you saw a bird in the wild, okay? So how about these chimney swifts flying around me? Well, they're flying or soaring, so I would check that off. Okay, so next, there are more things that you can check off on here, but for the sake of time, let's keep moving, because I know you want to get to what else is in your bag. All right, so turn to page 7. This is a really good one to practice, okay? These are kind of like different shapes of birds, of groups of birds. And if you memorize kind of these groups of birds and their shapes, then that, along with the bird's habitat and what it's doing, its behavior, can really help you narrow down your identification, what kind of bird it is that you're seeing, okay? So for example, if you see a bird that is wading in the water, that's its behavior, and its habitat, it's in a pond, and it has a long neck and long legs, like this shape, then you know that that is a heron, okay? The heron group all live in water and have long necks and long legs and long beaks. And from there, you can look at its size and colors like we just did to help you figure out what kind of heron it is. So in Patterson Park, there are at least 3 different kinds of herons that live there. There are great blue herons like this one, and then there are really small herons that are a slightly different color called green herons, and then there is a heron that's kind of in the middle, like this size, called a black-crowned night heron, okay? But when I start with behavior and habitat and then memorize the shapes of the birds, I can narrow it down to one of those 3 kinds of birds and then use its size and colors to figure out its identification, okay? So it's super fun. And you can even keep track of the different kinds of birds that you find. You can write them in a list. It's really fun. So, here's what we're gonna do next. The moment you've all been waiting for. Now, when we see birds in the wild, a lot of times we can't get really close to them because what do they do? Yeah, if we disturb them, they're gonna fly away. Or in the case of an ostrich, run away. Or in the case of a penguin, swim away. Okay, but they're probably going to try to get away from you. So, scientists use a really special tool to be able to see the birds up close. No, it's not their hand lens, because that would not work very well if I was trying to see a bird with my hand lens. That's just silly. They use a special tool that you have in your bag called binoculars. Binoculars, it's binocular time. I'm so excited, you're so excited, you use your binoculars. All right, sorry, just had to get that out because I've been so excited to use binoculars with you. So take out your binoculars. I know right now you're probably not listening to a word I'm saying because you're looking all around. So get that out of your system a little bit. Are you ready? Okay. If you want to play more, you can always pause the video. Just don't fast forward me. I will know if you fast forwarded me. Just kidding, I won't know. All right, so since binoculars are an important scientist tool, there are some rules that you should use anytime you're using them, okay, to make sure that they don't break. First thing that you will observe if you are being a good observer is that these binoculars look a little different from the ones that came in your bag, right? That's because these are Audubon's binoculars. See, they say Audubon on them, but they work just the same, okay? So I'm going to tell you some rules on how to use your binoculars because I want your binoculars to last a really long time. I want you to be able to be an ornithologist, scientist, observer for years. And you can't be an ornithologist, scientist, observer if your binoculars get broken, right? Okay, so there are some important tools we have to follow. And the first tool is to put your binocular strap around your neck, okay? If I'm using my binoculars like this and I get excited and I run around, I might drop them and they might break, okay? So your binoculars may have come with a strap. You might need to attach them. You might need an adult to help you with that, but always put the strap around your neck, all right? Rule number 2 for binoculars. Are you ready? Rule number 2 for using binoculars is never, ever, ever, never, ever, never, ever, ever, never, never, ever, never, ever look at the sun with your binoculars because your binoculars are made to magnify things. It's kind of like using a much more powerful magnifying glass. If you look through a magnifying glass at the sun, you would burn your eyeball, okay? So do not ever look at the sun with your binoculars. Rule number 3, only use binoculars when you are standing or sitting, never while you are walking. If I'm walking around and using my binoculars like this, what could happen? Yeah, I can't see where I'm going. I'm gonna trip and fall and hurt myself, or worse, damage my binoculars, okay? So only use binoculars while you are standing. Use those listening observation skills that we practiced to listen for birds around you. And then when you hear one, when you see one, then stop walking, and then use your binoculars, okay? There are some different parts of your binoculars. You're gonna have to practice using the different parts. Your binoculars do not zoom in and out. That's not something that binoculars do, but you should be able to focus them. So you should be able to look through and then turn a knob back and forth. Keep both of your eyes open so that you can make the image more clear, okay? If you look through and it's blurry, you'll have to adjust that to make it clear. All right, so it's your turn. I can't very well go on a bird walk right now with you. Although I do see birds flying around. Ooh, so much fun! All right, let's see. All right, I'm sitting down, right? I'm being safe. I'm not looking at the sun. So this is cool. I just saw a bird, and now, where'd my guidebook go? Here it is. Now I get to use my Bird Sleuth Explorer's Guidebook to try to identify what kind of bird it is, okay? So, I'm gonna figure out where's the bird and what's it doing, and then what shape of bird it is. It kind of looks like a swallow. I could make a list of the birds that I saw and where I saw them. I could see what size it is. This bird's pretty small. It's like all blackish brown. If I still don't know what kind of bird I'm seeing, this page number 9, is really helpful. You can draw a picture of the bird that you saw and make some notes about different patterns. They're called field marks that are on its body. So you'll definitely need your binoculars. If you can see this bird up close, you can tell if it has field marks like a black chin or a white wing bar that's like a stripe on its wing. Those things are going to help you finally narrow down and decide exactly what kind of bird it is that you are seeing. When you identify your bird, you can make a list. So page 10 says bird count. You can make a list of the different kinds of birds that you saw and how many you saw. And this, my friends, is called data. Data! Data is awesome. And data is important. It's important to share data. So, I hope that you go out and see lots of different kinds of birds. I hope that you're able to identify the birds. You could get a bird book from the library or even download an app to help you identify birds. There are lots of different free bird apps. One of them is called Merlin. M-E-R-L-I-N. The Merlin bird app is a good one to use to identify birds. And then once you identify it and you count it, that data can be shared with other scientists. You could use a website called ebird.org to share your data with other people all around the world. And that is actually what your guidebook talks about on the very back. It talks about sharing your data on ebird.org. Okay, so that's a follow-up activity that you can do. I hope that you have so much fun exploring. I hope you get so much use out of your binoculars. I wish I could be there to see you using your binoculars. I know you're gonna have so much fun. Really great job practicing being an ornithologist today. We're gonna see each other again really soon for some more exciting Audubon adventures. I cannot wait. All right, friends, be safe, have fun. See you later. Bye.